Hey, what is up, everyone? Today we got a pretty cool story. It's narrated by Frederick Surrey. So get cozy, enjoy it, and watch it till the end, guys.
Deep beneath the sprawling monumentality of the Imperial Palace on Terra, where the very bones of ancient mountains bear the weight of humanity's greatest fortress, there exists a silence more profound than the void between stars. It is a silence born not of emptiness, but of secrets too terrible to voice, of knowledge too dangerous to share, of truths that could shatter the fragile sanity of an entire species. This silence is kept by warriors clad in burnished gold, beings who stand as living monuments to perfection, yet who carry burdens that would crush lesser minds beneath their impossible weight. These are the Adeptus Custodies, the Emperor's own guardians, and they are bound by oaths that transcend simple loyalty or duty. They are keepers of mysteries that predate the Imperium itself, watchers over horrors from humanity's darkest hours, sentinels standing between mankind and truths that must never see light. And they are forbidden, by ancient decree and iron necessity, from speaking of what they guard. To understand why these golden warriors maintain their eternal silence, we must first understand what they are, what they protect, and what terrible knowledge they bear. For in the grim darkness of the far future, some secrets are kept not for the protection of those who hold them, but for the salvation of those who must never know. The Golden Legion. Origins of the 10,000. Before we can comprehend the nature of their silence, we must first understand what the Custodians truly are. They are not merely warriors, though they are perhaps the most formidable fighters humanity has ever produced. They are not simply guardians, though their vigil has lasted for more than 10 millennia. They are something far more complex, far more tragic, and far more essential to the survival of mankind than any chronicle or legend can properly convey. The origins of the Adeptus Custodes stretch back to the Age of Strife, that terrible epoch when humanity's first empire collapsed into barbarism and Terra itself became a battleground for techno-barbarian warlords. In those darkest days, a being of unimaginable power emerged from the chaos, a figure who would come to be known simply as the Emperor of Mankind. And from the very beginning of his conquest, this emperor understood a fundamental truth. He would need guardians who were more than mere soldiers, companions who could stand in his presence without corruption, protectors whose loyalty was absolute and whose capabilities were beyond question. The first Custodians were not created through the crude genecraft that would later produce the Thunder Warriors, or even the refined processes that gave birth to the Space Marines. No, the Custodians were crafted through arts that remain unknown to this day, alchemical processes that transformed chosen infants from the noblest bloodlines of Terra into something that transcended humanity itself. Each Custodian was a unique work of genetic and psychological engineering, individually tailored and personally overseen in their creation. Where Space Marines were mass-produced soldiers, each Custodian was a masterpiece, a singular achievement of the Emperor's forbidden sciences. The differences between a Custodian and a Space Marine are profound and manifold. Where an Astartes receives gene seed implants that transform their adolescent body into that of a transhuman warrior, a Custodian undergoes total genetic restructuring from infancy, their very cells rewritten at the most fundamental level. Where a Space Marine is trained to fight as part of a brotherhood, bonded to his battle brothers through shared trials and mutual dependence, a Custodian is forged to stand alone, an individual warrior of such capability that he needs no support, no companionship, no reassurance beyond his own perfection. Where an Astartes knows the comfort of brotherhood and shared purpose, a Custodian knows only isolation and the weight of individual responsibility. But perhaps the most significant difference lies not in their bodies, but in their minds. Space Marines are conditioned for loyalty, their psychology shaped to ensure obedience to the Emperor and devotion to their chapter. Custodians, however, are something far more sophisticated. They are educated as well as trained, their minds filled with encyclopedic knowledge of warfare, politics, philosophy, art, and every conceivable threat that might arise. They were designed not merely to protect the Emperor's body, but to serve as his companions, beings with whom he could converse on any subject. advisors who could comprehend the full scope of his vision for humanity's future. This education, this expansion of their mental capacity beyond that of normal humans, or even space marines, is what makes them capable of bearing the secrets they guard. But it is also what makes those secrets such a terrible burden. A custodian cannot simply follow orders without understanding their context. They cannot protect something without comprehending its nature. And they cannot guard the Emperor's most dangerous secrets without knowing, in full and terrible detail, exactly what they are keeping hidden from the rest of humanity. The Custodian Guard, as they were known during the Great Crusade and Horus Heresy, numbered 10,000 strong by the time the Emperor launched his conquest of the stars. This was no arbitrary figure, but a carefully calculated force, large enough to fulfill their duties, yet small enough that each warrior could receive the individual attention and craftsmanship their creation required. Even today, in the Dark Millennium, following the Emperor's internment upon the Golden Throne, the Adeptus Custodes maintain this sacred number, replacing fallen guardians with new recruits drawn from Terra's nobility, ensuring that the 10,000 endure as they have for more than 10,000 years. But numbers alone do not capture the magnitude of what the Custodians represent. Each of these 10,000 warriors is worth 100 Space Marines in combat, their reactions faster, their strength greater, their tactical acumen more refined. They bear weapons and armor crafted with arts lost to the rest of the Imperium, wielding guardian spears that combine power weapons with integrated bolt launchers, wearing auramite armor that shimmers with an inner radiance and turns aside blows that would cleave through ceramite. They are equipped with technologies from the dark age of technology that the Adeptus Mechanicus would commit any atrocity to possess. Forbidden weapons like Adrathic disintegrators that reduce targets to component atoms, or Lastrum bolters, whose ammunition is handcrafted to specifications known only to the Custodians themselves. Yet for all their physical might, for all their martial superiority, the Custodians are not defined by their ability to wage war. They are defined by what they know, by what they have seen, by what they have been entrusted to protect and to hide. And it is this knowledge, more than any weapon or armor, that sets them apart from every other warrior in the Imperium. The Sanctum Imperialis, heart of all secrets. To understand what the Custodians guard, we must journey to the very heart of the Imperial Palace, descending through layers of history and architecture until we reach the Sanctum Imperialis itself. This journey is not merely physical, but metaphorical, a descent into secrets that grow darker and more terrible with each level we pass. The Imperial Palace is not a single structure, but a vast complex that sprawls across what were once the Himalayan mountains, a region now known as the Himalayas. It is a city unto itself, home to millions of servants, administrators, priests, and warriors, its towers reaching kilometers into the polluted Terran sky, while its roots delve just as deep into the planet's crust. To walk from one end of the palace to the other would take weeks, even for one who knew the optimal paths, and there are corridors and chambers that have remained unexplored for millennia, their original purposes forgotten, their current inhabitants unknown. The palace is divided into concentric rings, each more secure and more sacred than the last. The outer palace contains the administrative centers, the spaceports, the barracks for the countless soldiers who garrison Terra. Here, pilgrims from across the galaxy gather in their millions, hoping for even the most distant glimpse of the world where the Emperor dwells. Here, the daily business of governing 1,000,000 worlds is conducted by armies of scribes and administrators, their work continuing in endless cycles that have remained unchanged for 10,000 years. Moving inward, past fortifications that could withstand planetary bombardment, past void shields that could turn aside the weapons of an entire fleet, past kill zones where defensive batteries could atomize entire armies in seconds, we reach the inner palace. This is where the true power of the Imperium resides, where the great institutions that maintain humanity's grip on the galaxy make their home. Here stands the Tower of Hegemon, command center of the Custodian Guard, a structure of such imposing majesty that even veteran space marines must pause in awe when first glimpsing its golden spires. Here lies the Senatorum Imperialis, where the High Lords of Terra convene to make decisions that affect trillions of lives. Here burns the Astronomicon, that great psychic beacon that guides humanity's ships through the turbulent currents of the warp, maintained by the daily sacrifice of thousands of psychers whose souls are consumed to keep its light burning. But even these wonders pale before what lies at the very center of the inner palace, protected by the massive adamantium portal known as the Eternity Gate. Beyond this gate, flanked eternally by two warhound titans of the ancient Legio Ignatum and guarded by the full might of the Custodian Guard, lies the Sanctum Imperialis itself. The approach to the Eternity Gate is through the Hall of Heroes, a processional corridor so vast that entire armies could march through it in formation. The walls of this hall are lined with banners, thousands upon thousands of them, each representing a regiment of the Astra Militarum or a chapter of the Adeptus Astartes that has served the Emperor with distinction. They hang in silence. These proud standards, witness to the endless stream of supplicants, diplomats, and functionaries who are granted the rare privilege of passing through the Eternity Gate into the Emperor's presence. For only the Custodians may pass through the Eternity Gate freely, without permission or ceremony. They alone hold the authority to determine who may be granted audience with the Emperor, and their judgment in this matter is absolute. High Lords of Terra must kneel before them and request entry. Inquisitors, those who hold authority over space marines and planetary governors alike, must humble themselves before the Golden Guardians. Even the space marines themselves, the Emperor's angels of death, who know no fear, must bow before the Custodians when seeking entrance to the Sanctum Imperialis. Beyond the Eternity Gate lies the Hall of the Golden Throne, though to call it merely a hall is to grossly understate its scale. This chamber is vast beyond comprehension, its ceiling lost in shadows high above, its walls adorned with carvings and inscriptions that chronicle the history of humanity from its earliest days to the present. The air itself seems to thrum with power here, charged with psychic energy so intense that normal humans cannot enter without experiencing vertigo and disorientation. The very stones of this place have been saturated with the Emperor's power over 10,000 years, transformed into something more than mere matter, imbued with a quality that defies description. And at the center of this vast chamber, surrounded by a ring of 300 custodians who stand in perfect stillness, their guardian spears held at attention, their eyes never wavering from their sacred charge, sits the Golden Throne itself. The Golden Throne, prison, and portal. The Golden Throne is many things, and understanding its true nature requires us to look beyond the propaganda and legends that have accumulated over 10 millennia. To the common citizens of the Imperium, it is simply the life support throne upon which the God Emperor sits, maintaining the Astronomicon and watching over humanity with his divine sight. To the tech priests of Mars, it is the most sacred relic of their faith, a miracle of archaeotech that surpasses anything they could hope to create. To the High Lords of Terra, it is the foundation upon which the Imperium rests, the device whose failure would mean the end of all things. But to the Custodians who stand eternal vigil over it, the Golden Throne is something far more complex and far more terrible. It is a prison that holds not just the Emperor's broken body, but also the gateway to humanity's greatest shame and most dangerous secret. The origins of the Golden Throne remain shrouded in mystery, even to the Custodians who guard it. Some ancient records suggest that the Emperor discovered the core of the device in the ruins of humanity's first empire, buried beneath the deserts of ancient Asia, a relic from the dark age of technology, or perhaps even older. Other accounts claim that the Emperor designed it himself, based on principles he had observed in studying another similar device found on a distant world. The truth, like so many truths about the Emperor himself, may never be fully known. What is certain is that the Golden Throne was not originally designed as a life support system. Its primary function was far more ambitious and far more dangerous. The Golden Throne was meant to be a gateway, a controlled portal into the webway, that vast network of tunnels through the immaterium created by the ancient Aeldari at the height of their power. The Emperor had discovered ways to access this alien infrastructure, and he saw in it humanity's salvation from the predations of chaos. For you see, the Emperor understood better than anyone else in the galaxy the nature of the threat that chaos represented. He knew that as long as humanity relied on the warp for faster-than-light travel, as long as psychers remained vulnerable to demonic possession, as long as the souls of humans provided sustenance to the dark gods, mankind would forever remain in peril. The webway offered an alternative, a network of passages that existed within the warp, yet remained separate from it, protected from the predations of demons by arcane technologies beyond even the Emperor's full understanding. The Emperor's plan was audacious in scope and breathtaking in its ambition. He would create a human section of the webway, connecting Terra to the far reaches of the galaxy, allowing humanity to travel without exposing themselves to the corrupting influence of the warp. He would gather all of humanity's psychers on Terra, where they could be trained and controlled, their powers harnessed safely rather than becoming gateways for demonic incursion. He would, in essence, free humanity from its dependence on the warp, severing the connection that fed the chaos gods and damning mankind to an endless cycle of corruption and warfare. But this plan, like so many of the Emperor's grand designs, was destroyed by the very beings he had created to help him achieve it. Magnus the Red, Primarch of the Thousand Suns Legion, discovered that the War Master Horus had fallen to chaos. In desperation to warn his father, and pridefully confident in his own psychic abilities, Magnus cast a spell of such power that it tore through the defenses the Emperor had painstakingly constructed around his webway project. The psychic shields shattered, the carefully sealed portal was breached, and daemons poured through the gateway in uncountable hordes. What followed has come to be known as the war within the webway, though few beyond the Custodians and the higher circles of the Mechanicus know that this war was ever fought. For 5 years, while the Horus heresy raged across the galaxy, the Emperor sat upon the Golden Throne, using its power-amplifying properties to hold back the demonic tide, while the Custodian Guard and the Sisters of Silence fought a desperate battle in the tunnels beyond the portal. The casualties were horrific. The Custodians, who had stood at the Emperor's side since before the unification of Terra, who had been husbanded carefully throughout the Great Crusade, were reduced by 90%. Thousands of the Emperor's most perfect warriors fell in those dark tunnels, their bodies consumed by demonic fire, their souls torn apart by entities of pure malevolence. The Sisters of Silence suffered equally terrible losses, their pariah gene providing some protection against the denizens of the warp, but offering no defense against the raw physical might of greater daemons and corrupted titans. Eventually, the Emperor was forced to abandon the webway entirely. He led the survivors back through the portal and sealed it shut, channeling his immense psychic might through the Golden Throne to keep the gateway closed. But the seal was never perfect, never complete. Even now, 10,000 years later, the Emperor must maintain constant vigilance, using a significant portion of his vast power to ensure that the portal remains closed and the demonic hordes beyond cannot pour through into the Imperial Palace and beyond. This is the first great secret that the Custodians guard, the first truth they are forbidden to speak. Beneath the Golden Throne, sealed behind golden doors large enough for a Warhound Titan to walk through, lies a gateway into hell itself. And should the Emperor's power ever fail, should the Golden Throne ever cease functioning, that gateway will open and Terra will be consumed by an endless tide of daemons. The Imperial Palace will become the greatest demonic incursion point in the galaxy, a permanent wound in reality through which the powers of the warp will pour forth to devour all of humanity. The tech priests who maintain the Golden Throne know only that it is failing, that its ancient mechanisms are degrading beyond their ability to repair, that each century sees it require more and more sacrifice to keep functioning. They do not know why it must keep functioning, what it is holding back, what would be unleashed if it failed. Only the Custodians know the full truth, and they are sworn to silence, for to speak of this secret would be to create panic that could tear the Imperium apart. But the webway portal is only the beginning of what the Custodians guard. The Golden Throne sits at the center of a web of secrets, each more terrible than the last, each demanding absolute silence from those who know of them. The war that never ended. Guardians of the sealed gate. The war within the webway may have ended with the Emperor sealing the portal, but the battle never truly stopped. What few realize, what the Custodians can never reveal, is that the war continues even now, every moment of every day, waged not with bolter and blade, but with psychic will and ancient technology. Beyond the sealed gateway, pressed against the barriers that the Emperor maintains through the Golden Throne, a demonic army waits. This is not a metaphorical threat or a distant possibility. This is a literal fact. On the other side of those golden doors, mere meters from the hall, where the Custodians stand their eternal vigil, uncountable daemons rage against the psychic seals that keep them contained. They have been there for 10,000 years, neither advancing nor retreating, eternally attempting to force their way through into reality. These are not the lesser daemons that occasionally manifest in the material universe through the desperation of cultists or the incompetence of rogue psychers. These are the elite troops of the Chaos Gods, greater daemons and daemon princes, corrupted traitor marines and fallen titans, all of whom entered the webway during the Great War and became trapped there when the Emperor sealed the portal. They exist in a hellish limbo, caught between the warp and reality, unable to return to the Imperium, but forever barred from entering the material universe. The Custodians can hear them sometimes, especially those who stand guard closest to the golden doors. They hear the whispers of entities that should not possess voices, the screams of tortured metal from corrupted titans that have been driven mad by 10 millennia of futile rage, the promises and threats of daemons who would offer anything to escape their prison. The Custodians hear these things, and they say nothing, for to speak of what they hear would be to give voice to blasphemies that could corrupt the very souls of those who listened. But the demons are not content to simply wait. They test the barriers constantly, probing for weaknesses, attempting to exploit any fluctuation in the Emperor's power or any degradation in the Golden Throne's failing mechanisms. Several times throughout the millennia, they have found gaps, moments when the seals weakened enough for a few to slip through. When this happens, the Custodians respond with absolute and overwhelming force, fighting secret battles in the deepest levels of the palace, slaying entities that should not exist with weapons specifically designed to permanently end demonic existence. These breaches are covered up, erased from all records, denied even to the Inquisition. The bodies of fallen daemons are destroyed utterly, reduced to their component atoms, and scattered across multiple star systems to prevent any trace from remaining. The Custodians who fought in these engagements are forbidden from speaking of them, even to their own brethren. The very fact that the seals can be breached, that demons can enter the heart of the Imperial Palace, is a secret that must be kept at all costs. Because if this truth became known, if the citizens of the Imperium discovered that the Golden Throne is not just maintaining the Emperor's life, but also holding back an endless demonic horde, if they learned that Terra itself stands mere moments from becoming the galaxy's greatest warp rift, the faith upon which the Imperium is built would shatter. How could the masses continue to worship the God Emperor if they knew he was using most of his power not to watch over humanity, but simply to keep demons from overwhelming his own throne room? How could the Imperium's leaders make rational decisions if they knew that every choice, every plan, every strategy existed under the shadow of potential instant annihilation? So the Custodians stand their vigil in silence, watching for any sign that the seals are weakening, prepared to fight and die to buy even a few more moments if the barriers should fail. They know that their duty may ultimately be futile, that the Golden Throne is failing, and there may be no way to prevent its eventual collapse. But they also know that speaking this truth would only hasten the end, would sow the seeds of despair that chaos feeds upon. The silence they maintain is not born of ignorance or denial. It is a conscious choice, a burden they bear willingly, understanding that some truths are too terrible to share even when, or perhaps especially when, those truths may spell doom for all humanity. The dark cells, prison of the unimaginable. If the webway portal and its daimonic inhabitants represent the Emperor's greatest failure, then the dark cells represent his oldest and most enduring act of mercy. Deep beneath the Imperial Palace, in levels so far below the surface that they extend past the roots of ancient mountains, lies a prison unlike any other in the galaxy. Here, in darkness absolute and silence complete, are locked away the most dangerous entities and artifacts that humanity has ever encountered. The dark cells, also known as the black cells or the vaults of Rythan, are not simply a prison for dangerous criminals or captured enemies. They are a repository of existential threats, things so dangerous that allowing them to exist freely would risk the annihilation of mankind itself. And they are guarded by the Shadow Keepers, a shield host of the Adeptus Custodies who have dedicated themselves entirely to this grim duty. The origins of the dark cells stretch back to the Age of Strife and even before, to the dark age of technology when humanity's reach extended across the galaxy and its scientific achievements bordered on the miraculous. During that golden age, human scientists developed technologies and weapons of such power that they could reshape worlds, alter reality itself, or obliterate entire civilizations with a thought. But the downfall of that ancient empire demonstrated with terrible clarity that not all knowledge should be pursued, that not all technologies should be developed, that some things are better left undiscovered. When the Emperor emerged to reunite humanity during the Age of Strife, he encountered the remnants of that fallen civilization. He found weapons that had been designed to kill gods, technologies that could unravel the fabric of reality, entities that had been created by human hubris and could not be destroyed by any known means. The Emperor understood that these things could not be allowed to fall into the wrong hands, but he also understood that they could not simply be destroyed, either because they were indestructible or because destroying them would cause catastrophic consequences. So he created the Vaults of Rythan, named for the mountain range beneath which they were first constructed, and he tasked a detachment of his custodian guard with standing eternal watch over them. Over the millennia, as the Great Crusade swept across the galaxy, and then as the Imperium endured 10,000 years of constant warfare, the vaults grew. More and more dangerous items were added, more entities were sealed away, until the dark cells became a labyrinth of 81 levels, each more secure and more terrible than the last. The technology that seals the dark cells is beyond the understanding of even the Adeptus Mechanicus. Rune-locked portals that respond only to specific genetic signatures and psychic resonances. Wards that draw their power from sources unknown, creating barriers that neither physical force nor psychic power can breach. Sanctic circles inscribed with geometries that hurt to look upon. Patterns that somehow reinforce the walls of reality itself. And throughout this labyrinth, corridors patrolled by the Shadow Keepers in their distinctive black armor, 100 custodians who never leave their posts, who spend decades or even centuries walking the same passages, ensuring that nothing escapes. But what, exactly, is imprisoned in the dark cells? The full catalogue is known only to the Lock Warden of the Shadow Keepers, and perhaps to the Emperor himself. But fragments of information, glimpsed in ancient records or overheard in whispered conversations between custodians, suggest some of what lies within. There are weapons from the dark age of technology, devices whose mechanisms are no longer understood, but whose power is undeniable. Adrathic weapons that can reduce any matter to its component particles. Devices that can create micro-singularities or tear holes in reality. Technologies that can alter time itself, or reach across the galaxy to strike targets with perfect precision. Any one of these weapons, in the wrong hands, could reshape the balance of power in the galaxy. All of them together could destroy the Imperium entirely. There are entities, beings that were once human, but were transformed by ancient sciences into something other, something that cannot be allowed to exist in the wider universe. Men of iron, artificial intelligences from the dark age of technology that rebelled against their creators and nearly destroyed humanity. Psychers of such power that they could not be killed but only contained, their minds perpetually screaming against their prisons. Things that might have once been human but have been so altered by chaos or Xenos influence that they no longer fit any category. Abominations that exist in a state somewhere between life and death, reality and unreality. There are fragments of knowledge, data storage devices containing information that must never be accessed. the true names of greater daemons, which if spoken could summon those entities to Terra itself. Complete genetic templates for extinct species of Xenos that were so dangerous that the Emperor personally oversaw their eradication. Psychic techniques that can unravel the barriers between the material universe and the warp. Histories that contradict the official narratives of the Imperium. Records of events that never officially occurred. Evidence of atrocities committed in the Emperor's name during the Unification Wars and the Great Crusade. And then there are the things for which no adequate description exists. Entities so alien and so terrible that even the custodians who guard them cannot fully comprehend what they are. Things from the age of strife when the galaxy was torn apart by warp storms and old night descended upon humanity. Horrors that emerged from those storms. Beings of pure malevolence that somehow exist in the material universe, despite their demonic nature. Artifacts that seem to exist in multiple states simultaneously. Objects that are and are not, that possess properties that should be impossible, according to the laws of physics. The atmosphere in the corridors of the dark cells is oppressive in a way that transcends physical discomfort. Even the custodians, beings of immense willpower and unshakable resolve, feel the weight of dread that permeates these passages. Though no sound escapes the cells themselves, though no light penetrates the perfect darkness, the air itself seems to crawl with malevolence. Shadows move in ways that shadows should not move. The walls seem to press inward, as if the very structure of the prison is straining to contain what lies within. Some prisoners in the dark cells possess what the custodians call anima, a quality of consciousness or awareness that allows them to exert influence even from within their sealed chambers. These entities cannot escape physically, cannot breach the barriers that contain them, but they can touch the minds of those who walk the corridors nearby. The Shadow Keepers train extensively to resist such influence, but even they are not immune. Some custodians, after serving guard duty in the dark cells for too long, must be rotated out and given time to recover, their minds frayed by constant exposure to things that should not be contemplated. The true horror of the dark cells, however, is not what they contain now, but what they might contain in the future. For you see, the dark cells are not static. They continue to grow, to expand, to accept new prisoners as the Imperium encounters new threats.
You know, I have to pause here for a moment because this aspect of the lore genuinely haunts me. Think about what we were discussing. The Custodians aren't villains, they're not power-hungry deceivers. They're arguably the most loyal warriors humanity has ever produced, and that loyalty has trapped them in an impossible position. They know the truth would destroy everything they're trying to protect, so they bear that weight in absolute silence. Every time I read about a Custodian standing vigil in the throne room, I can't help but wonder what goes through their minds during those endless hours. They're watching over what might be nothing more than a corpse, or perhaps a god being born, or maybe something in between we don't have the words for. And they can never ever talk about it. That level of isolation and that burden of knowledge, it's a horror that has nothing to do with demons or aliens. It's purely human, which somehow makes it worse. And this is what makes Warhammer so compelling. It's not just the battles or the cool armor. It's about these impossible moral situations where there are no good answers. Only terrible choices and people trying their best to navigate them. The Custodians are living proof that sometimes love and loyalty require lying to those you're protecting. Anyways, let's continue.
In the years since the opening of the Great Rift, since the Cicatrix Maledictum tore the galaxy in half and unleashed waves of demonic incursion across human space, the rate at which new prisoners are being added has increased dramatically. When the Great Rift opened, reality itself became unstable. The barriers between the warp and the material universe weakened everywhere, but especially on Terra, which sits at the heart of the Astronomicon and is thus saturated with psychic energy. In the deep cells, some of the wards failed, some of the seals weakened, and some of the prisoners escaped. The Shadow Keepers found themselves fighting battles in the very corridors they had patrolled peacefully for millennia, engaging entities that had been safely contained for thousands of years. Many custodians fell in those dark passages, their names added to the rolls of the honored dead, their sacrifice ensuring that even more prisoners did not escape. But for every entity that was recaptured or destroyed, a dozen more remain unaccounted for, loose somewhere in the galaxy, their locations unknown, their activities unknowable. This is the second great secret that the Custodians must keep. The Imperial Palace itself, the most secure location in the entire Imperium, suffered a massive security breach. Entities capable of destroying worlds, weapons that could end civilizations, knowledge that could tear reality apart, all of it escaped into the galaxy. And somewhere out there, in the darkness between stars, these things exist, possibly in the hands of the Imperium's enemies, possibly waiting to be discovered by those who should never find them. The Shadowkeepers have sent forces out into the galaxy for the first time in 10,000 years, hunting for these escaped prisoners, attempting to recapture or destroy them before they can cause catastrophic damage. But they do so in secret, revealing nothing of their true purpose, fabricating cover stories and false reports to hide the fact that the dark cells were breached. Because to admit what happened would be to reveal the existence of the dark cells themselves, and that is something that must never occur. For if the wider Imperium learned of the dark cells, if the High Lords or the Inquisition discovered what was kept there, they would demand access. They would insist on examining the contents, on determining whether any of these weapons or technologies could be used against the Imperium's enemies. And the moment that process began, the moment that Inquisitors or tech priests started studying the contents of the dark cells, attempting to understand technologies that the Emperor himself deemed too dangerous to use, attempting to control entities that should never have been allowed to exist, the result would be catastrophic. Some secrets are kept not because they are valuable, but because they are poison. The dark cells contain knowledge and power that would corrupt anyone who attempted to wield them. The Emperor understood this, which is why he sealed these things away rather than attempting to use them, why he tasked the most incorruptible beings in the Imperium with guarding them in perpetuity. The Shadowkeepers know the names of every prisoner, the nature of every weapon, the contents of every sealed data vault. This knowledge is a burden that weighs upon them more heavily than any physical load. They know what would be unleashed if they failed in their duty, what horrors would be inflicted upon humanity if even a handful of the dark cell's contents were released. And they know that they can never share this knowledge, can never seek help or advice, can never allow anyone to understand the full scope of what they guard. In the deepest cells, in the most secure vaults, there are prisoners whose very names have been erased from all records. These are things so dangerous that even knowing they exist is considered an unacceptable risk. The Shadowkeepers who guard these cells are forbidden from thinking about what they contain, trained to simply patrol their assigned corridors without ever contemplating what lies behind the sealed doors they pass. For some truths are so terrible that even warriors as strong as Custodians must protect themselves through willful ignorance. The Forbidden Vault, secrets of the throne world, beyond even the dark cells, in chambers so deeply buried that they approach the molten core of terror itself, lies a vault that most Custodians do not know exists. This is the Forbidden Vault, a repository of secrets that predates the Imperium, that contains knowledge accumulated by humanity across millions of years of history, from the species' first emergence from the forests of ancient Terra to the present day. The location of the Forbidden Vault is one of the Imperium's most closely guarded secrets. It is said to lie beneath the Golden Throne itself, its adamantium gates sealed by stasis fields and locked with the personal seal of the High Lords of Terra. Access is restricted to a degree that makes the requirements for entering the Sanctum Imperialis look permissive by comparison. Only the most senior High Lords, only the highest-ranking Custodians, only those who have demonstrated absolute incorruptibility and unwavering loyalty are ever permitted to approach its doors, and even they must present compelling justification for any attempt to access the vault's contents. What lies within the Forbidden Vault is a matter of speculation, even among those who know of its existence. But fragments of evidence, hints contained in ancient records, suggest that it houses humanity's most complete and accurate historical archive. This includes records from the Dark Age of technology, when humanity first spread across the stars and developed sciences that made the current Imperium's technology look primitive by comparison. It includes data from the Age of Strife, chronicling humanity's fall from greatness and the horrors that accompanied that collapse. It includes the complete and unredacted history of the Great Crusade and the Horus Heresy, every battle and every betrayal recorded in excruciating detail. But the Forbidden Vault contains more than simply accurate history. It holds truths that the Imperium was built to deny, facts that contradict the founding narratives upon which the current regime depends, visual records of Xeno civilizations that were destroyed during the Great Crusade, species that might have been peaceful, that might have coexisted with humanity, but were exterminated nonetheless, because the Emperor decreed that humanity must stand alone in the galaxy. Evidence of decisions made by the Emperor himself that led directly to catastrophic consequences, choices that appeared wise at the time, but whose long-term effects contributed to the Imperium's current state of decay. The Vault contains records of genetic experiments conducted during the creation of the Primarchs, showing not just the successes, but the failures, the stillborn monstrosities that were discarded in the Emperor's quest to create his perfect generals. It holds the true names and full histories of the lost Primarchs, the 2nd and 11th Legions whose existence has been purged from all official records, whose very memory is forbidden to speak of. It contains data on the creation process for Custodians, Space Marines, and even the Thunder Warriors, who came before both, technologies that could theoretically allow someone to recreate these warriors, but which have been sealed away to prevent any attempt to do so. Most disturbing of all, the Forbidden Vault is rumored to contain information about the Emperor himself, his true origins, his real nature, facts that would shatter the myths upon which the imperial cult is built. The citizens of the Imperium worship the Emperor as a god, an immortal being of infinite power and boundless benevolence, who watches over humanity from his golden throne. But what if he was never a god? What if he was simply a powerful psyker, perhaps even the most powerful human to ever live, but still fundamentally human, still subject to error and limitation? What if the imperial cult, the worship that sustains and empowers him in his current state, is built upon lies? These are questions that cannot be asked within the Imperium, heresies that would result in immediate execution for anyone foolish enough to voice them. But they are questions that must be answerable, at least to some degree, for there must exist records of the Emperor's true nature, documentation from before the Unification Wars, when he was known by other names and walked openly among humanity. Such records would be invaluable for understanding the Emperor's true condition, for determining whether there is any way to heal him or replace the failing Golden Throne. But they would also be utterly devastating to the faith of billions upon billions of Imperial citizens if they became known. The Custodians who know of the Forbidden Vault's existence understand this paradox. The knowledge within could potentially save the Imperium, could provide insights that might solve the current crisis. But accessing that knowledge would require revealing truths that would destroy the faith holding the Imperium together. So the vault remains sealed, its contents accessible only in the most dire emergency, and even then only to those who can be trusted to never reveal what they learn. There exists within the Custodian Guard a subset of warriors who serve as the keepers of this vault, guardians who have sworn oaths even more binding than those taken by their brethren. These custodians have willingly subjected themselves to psycho-conditioning that makes it impossible for them to discuss what they guard, neural blocks that literally prevent them from forming words about the vault's contents, even under the most extreme torture or psychic interrogation. They are living locks, keys that cannot be duplicated, their very existence ensuring that the secrets they protect can only be accessed through proper channels. Some of these guardian keepers have served for thousands of years, their duty stretching across millennia, their knowledge accumulated until they become walking repositories of humanity's darkest secrets. They have read records that no one else alive has seen, have studied data that illuminates the true nature of the Imperium's founding, have learned truths that would drive lesser minds to madness, and they can never share what they know, can never discuss their burden with anyone, must bear their knowledge in absolute isolation for as long as they live. The psychological toll of such service is immense. To know secrets of such magnitude and be unable to discuss them, to carry knowledge that could reshape the Imperium but be forbidden from acting on it, creates a kind of isolation that transcends physical solitude. Some of these keepers eventually request to be allowed to end their service, to undergo procedures that erase their memories and allow them to return to normal duty. Others embrace their isolation, finding a kind of peace in the acceptance that some burdens must be borne alone. But the existence of the Forbidden Vault raises a fundamental question about the nature of the custodian's silence. They are forbidden from speaking, not because they lack the authority to do so, but because the truths they know would be more destructive than any weapon, more corrosive than any heresy. Their silence is not enforced by threat or punishment, but by understanding, by the recognition that some knowledge should not be shared. The nature of their oaths, bound by choice and necessity. To comprehend why the custodians maintain their silence so absolutely, we must understand the nature of the oaths they swear. These are not simple pledges of loyalty or declarations of duty. They are fundamental transformations of the custodian's very being, commitments that reshape their psychology as thoroughly as their genetic engineering reshapes their bodies. When a new custodian completes his training and is deemed ready to take his place among the 10,000, he undergoes a ceremony that has remained unchanged for more than 10,000 years. This ceremony takes place in the deepest chambers of the Imperial Palace, in ancient halls that were old when the Emperor first unified Terra. The initiate kneels before the assembled custodian guard, his brothers and sisters who have walked this path before him, and he swears his oath. The words of this oath are not recorded in any archive accessible to outsiders. They are taught orally, passed from custodian to custodian, memorized perfectly, and spoken only during the induction ceremony. But those who have heard fragments of the oath, those few companions who have been permitted to witness such ceremonies, report that it is a thing of terrible beauty, a promise so absolute and so comprehensive that it encompasses every aspect of the custodian's existence. The oath binds the custodian to the Emperor's service, naturally, but it is far more specific than that. It requires the custodian to protect not just the Emperor's physical form, but his legacy, his secrets, his vision for humanity's future. It demands that the custodian place the Emperor's will above all other considerations, above personal preference, above the good of the Imperium if necessary, above even their own survival. It acknowledges that the custodian may be called upon to do things that would horrify the citizens they are sworn to protect, may be required to keep secrets that could save millions, but must be kept for the good of billions. But most importantly, the oath includes specific provisions about secrecy, detailed requirements about what can and cannot be discussed. A custodian swears to reveal nothing of what they witness in the Emperor's presence, nothing of what they guard in the palace depths, nothing of the true state of the Golden Throne, or the threats that press constantly against the palace's defenses. They swear to answer questions about their duty with carefully prepared statements that reveal nothing of substance, to deflect inquiries with such skill that the questioner does not even realize they have learned nothing. This oath is reinforced through psycho-conditioning, mental programming that operates at a level below conscious thought. A custodian who attempts to discuss forbidden knowledge will find themselves unable to form the words, their mind literally preventing them from betraying their vows. This is not mind control in the traditional sense. A custodian retains full autonomy and free will, but certain pathways in their mind have been structured such that violating their oath becomes psychologically impossible, like trying to convince yourself that you don't exist. However, the conditioning is not absolute, and this is crucial to understanding the nature of the custodian's silence. It would have been possible to create warriors whose conditioning made it physically impossible for them to reveal secrets, whose minds were locked so thoroughly that no amount of torture or psychic interrogation could extract forbidden information. But the Emperor chose not to do this, deliberately leaving his custodians capable of breaking their oaths if they truly chose to do so. Why? Because the Emperor understood that absolute obedience was not the same as loyalty, that warriors who could not choose to follow him were less valuable than those who could choose but always chose correctly. The custodians maintain their silence not because they are incapable of speaking, but because they understand why they must remain silent. This distinction, is what separates them from mere automata, what makes them truly the Emperor's companions rather than his puppets. Every custodian lives with the knowledge that they could, theoretically, break their oath. They could reveal the secrets they guard, could tell the High Lords or the Inquisition, or even broadcast to the entire Imperium the truths that have been hidden for millennia. They possess the physical capability to do so, and while the psycho-conditioning would make it extremely difficult, it would not be impossible for one with sufficient willpower. But they do not. Not because they cannot, but because they have made the conscious choice not to. Every day, every moment, they reaffirm their oaths through action and through silence. This continuous choice, this ongoing commitment, is what gives their service meaning. They are not merely following programming. They are actively choosing to bear the burden of knowledge, to carry the weight of secrets, to maintain the silence that protects humanity from truths it cannot bear. This understanding extends to their relationship with each other as well. Custodians do not discuss their duty, even among themselves, except in the most general terms. Even within the Sanctum Imperialis, even in the most secure chambers of the palace, they speak carefully, always aware that some secrets should not be voiced even to those who already know them. There is a recognition that speaking a truth aloud makes it more real, more concrete, more dangerous. Thoughts can be controlled, but words once spoken cannot be recalled. The burden of this silence is immense. Imagine knowing the truth about the Imperium's founding, about the Emperor's true nature, about the threats that constantly press against humanity's survival, and being unable to discuss these things with anyone. Imagine watching the High Lords make decisions based on incomplete information, knowing that you possess the knowledge that could change their choices, but being forbidden from offering that knowledge. Imagine seeing the Imperium slowly collapse, resources wasted on theological debates, while existential threats go unaddressed, and knowing that you could prevent this, but must not. Some custodians, over the course of their incredibly long lives, find ways to cope with this burden. They lose themselves in martial perfection, focusing on the physical aspects of their duty to avoid dwelling on the knowledge aspects. They spend centuries in the blood games, the ritualized exercises where custodians attempt to breach the palace's security while their brethren defend against them, immersing themselves in the immediate challenge to avoid contemplating larger questions. Others find solace in philosophy, in the construction of mental frameworks that help them understand and accept the necessity of their silence. They develop personal codes of ethics that acknowledge the moral complexity of their position, that recognize that while lies and secrets are generally wrong, there exist situations where truth would be more harmful than falsehood. These custodians become informal counselors to their brethren, helping younger guardians navigate the psychological challenges of their duty. Still others eventually retire from active service, becoming part of the Eyes of the Emperor, a mysterious organization of former custodians who disappear into the galaxy disguised as normal humans. These retired guardians continue to serve the Emperor in a different capacity, gathering intelligence, eliminating threats, maintaining watch over humanity from within rather than from without. For some, this transition is a relief, a release from the burden of standing guard over secrets. But for others, it is simply a different form of the same duty, carrying the same knowledge, maintaining the same silence, but doing so alone in the darkness, beyond terror. What happens when secrets are revealed? The custodian's commitment to silence is not theoretical. Throughout the millennia, there have been instances when secrets were revealed, either through accident, treachery, or the actions of external forces. The consequences of these revelations demonstrate why the custodian's silence is so absolute and why they will go to any lengths to maintain it. During the Age of Apostasy, in the dark centuries of the 36th millennium, the Imperium nearly tore itself apart under the mad rule of Goge Vandire, the High Lord who declared himself master of the Administratum and Ecclesiarch simultaneously. His reign was a time of purges and paranoia, of corruption so extensive that it threatened to destroy the Imperium from within. The custodians watched this unfold with growing concern, constrained by their oath to protect the Emperor rather than govern the Imperium, unable to intervene directly in the affairs of state. But when Vandire's madness reached the point where it threatened the palace itself, when his armies approached the gates and his agents attempted to penetrate the Sanctum Imperialis, the Custodians acted. They used secret passages within the palace, tunnels known only to them, to bring Alicia Dominica, leader of the Sisters of Battle, into the presence of the Emperor himself. What she saw there, what communication passed between her and the Emperor, has never been revealed. But she emerged from that audience with absolute conviction, returning to execute Vandira and end his reign of terror. This incident demonstrates both the power and the danger of revelation. The truth that Dominica witnessed, whatever it was, provided the motivation and moral certainty needed to end a catastrophic period in imperial history. But it also demonstrates the Custodians' careful control over such revelations. Dominica was chosen specifically because she could be trusted to act on what she learned, without spreading the knowledge further. The Custodians calculated the risk and determined that in this case, a limited revelation served the Emperor's interests better than continued silence. But not all revelations are so carefully controlled. During the War of the Beast in the middle of the 32nd millennium, when a massive greenskin horde threatened Terra itself, the defense of the palace was so desperate that many secrets were necessarily exposed. Inquisitors and space marines fought alongside Custodians in areas of the palace they should never have accessed, saw things they should never have witnessed, learned truths that should have remained hidden. In the aftermath of that war, the Custodians were forced to engage in extensive damage control. Some of the witnesses were quietly eliminated, their knowledge deemed too dangerous to allow to persist. Others were subjected to memory modification, their experiences altered so that what they remembered was close enough to the truth to be believable, but different enough to obscure the most dangerous secrets. Still others were brought into a kind of limited confidence, told partial truths, and sworn to secrecy, becoming unwitting participants in the conspiracy of silence. These actions, undertaken without enthusiasm, but with absolute necessity, demonstrate the lengths to which the Custodians will go to maintain their secrets. They are not cruel by nature, do not enjoy the necessity of silencing those who learn too much, but they understand that the alternative, allowing dangerous knowledge to spread unchecked, would result in far greater suffering. More recently, in the years following the opening of the Great Rift, the Imperium faced perhaps its greatest crisis since the Horus Heresy. When Cypher, the mysterious fallen angel, arrived on Terra with information for the Emperor, he was imprisoned in the dark cells, despite having aided in the resurrection of Rabuta Gilliman. His escape during the chaos of the demonic invasion, his flight through the palace corridors, exposed many secrets that should have remained hidden. The Custodians who pursued him were forced to fight in areas of the palace that had not seen conflict in 10,000 years, revealing to the pursuing Dark Angels and other Imperial forces the existence of places that officially did not exist. The aftermath required extensive debriefings, careful construction of cover stories, and in some cases, the elimination of witnesses who had seen too much. But perhaps the most significant revelation in recent history was the discovery by certain elements within the Mechanicus of the true nature of the Golden Throne's deterioration. Tech priests, who had spent centuries maintaining the throne, began to piece together enough information to understand that it was not simply aging, but failing in a fundamental way, that their repairs were only delaying, not preventing. When they attempted to bring this information to the High Lords, the Custodians intervened, sequestering the relevant tech priests and suppressing their findings. This action nearly caused a schism between the Custodians and the Mechanicus, with the tech priests arguing that their expertise was needed to solve the crisis, and the Custodians insisting that the full truth of the situation could not be revealed. The compromise that was eventually reached involved a select group of the most trusted tech priests being given access to portions of the Golden Throne, enough to work on solutions without understanding the full scope of what they were repairing. It was an uncomfortable arrangement for both sides, but one necessitated by the fundamental conflict between the Mechanicus's drive for knowledge and the Custodians' mandate for secrecy. These incidents illustrate a crucial point. The Custodians' silence is not absolute in the sense of being unbreakable, but absolute in the sense of being their highest priority. When circumstances force revelations, they act immediately to contain the damage, to limit the spread of knowledge, to ensure that what must be revealed is revealed in the least harmful way possible. They are pragmatic in their secrecy, understanding that perfect concealment is impossible, but striving always to minimize exposure. The consequences of failed secrecy extend beyond immediate security concerns. When citizens of the Imperium learn truths that contradict their faith, it can trigger crises of belief that have cascading effects. Soldiers who discover that the Emperor they worship as a god might be something else lose the conviction that makes them willing to die for the Imperium. Administrators who learn that the system they serve is built on lies become cynical, performing their duties with less dedication. Psychers who understand the true nature of the Golden Throne may become more vulnerable to corruption, their doubts creating openings for demonic influence. The Imperium, for all its martial might and technological capability, is held together primarily by faith. The imperial cult, the worship of the God Emperor, provides the psychological and spiritual cohesion that allows a million worlds to function as a unified civilization. Any truth that undermines that faith, that reveals the human rather than divine origins of the imperial system, weakens the entire structure. This is why the Custodians guard their secrets so zealously. They understand that they are protecting not just physical security, but the ideological foundation of human civilization. The burden of eternal vigilance. To stand guard over secrets for 10,000 years is to bear a burden that transcends normal human comprehension. The Custodians are functionally immortal, their enhanced physiology aging so slowly that those who served during the Horus Heresy still serve today, their memories stretching back across millennia. This immortality, which might seem like a blessing, becomes a curse when paired with the knowledge they carry. Imagine living for 10,000 years, watching civilization slowly decline, seeing the Emperor's grand vision for humanity gradually corrupted and forgotten, knowing that you possess knowledge that might reverse this decline, but being forbidden from sharing it. Imagine standing guard over the Golden Throne, seeing it degrade a little more with each passing century, understanding that it is failing, and that its failure will likely mean the end of Terra itself, yet being unable to discuss this with anyone who might be able to help. Imagine knowing the truth about the Horus Heresy, understanding the full scope of that betrayal and the mistakes that led to it, while watching the Imperium repeat similar errors. Imagine having personally witnessed the Emperor's majesty and power when he walked among mortals, knowing what he truly was, and then seeing him worshipped as a god by those who have never stood in his presence. Imagine bearing witness to the slow transformation of the Imperium from a secular empire of reason and science into a theocratic nightmare of ignorance and superstition. Understanding that this transformation, however necessary it may have been, represents a betrayal of everything the Emperor originally stood for. The psychological strain of this burden manifests in different ways among different custodians. Some become almost mechanical in their behavior, retreating from emotional engagement and focusing purely on the physical aspects of their duty. They become perfect warriors, unsurpassed in combat, but lose something of their humanity in the process. Others become philosophers, spending their off-duty hours in contemplation and study, seeking wisdom that might help them understand and accept their situation. Some custodians develop an almost pathological need for order and control, extending the same perfectionism they apply to their martial skills to every aspect of their existence. Their quarters are maintained with obsessive precision, their routines followed with religious exactitude, their equipment maintained to standards that exceed even the already exceptional requirements of the custodian guard. This need for control is understandable. When so much of their existence involves secrets they cannot control, threats they can only contain rather than eliminate, they seek mastery in those areas where mastery is possible. Others go in the opposite direction, embracing a kind of fatalistic acceptance. They understand that the Imperium is failing, that the Golden Throne will eventually collapse, that all their vigilance may ultimately prove futile. Rather than despairing at this knowledge, they find a kind of peace in it, accepting that their duty is to delay the inevitable for as long as possible, to buy humanity a few more centuries, a few more millennia, to exist and evolve, and perhaps find its own solution to the crisis that approaches. The relationships between custodians are complex, marked by a peculiar combination of absolute trust and profound distance. They trust each other with their lives, know that any fellow custodian would die to protect them without hesitation. But they cannot share their innermost thoughts, cannot discuss the doubts and fears that arise from their knowledge, cannot seek comfort or reassurance from those who would understand best. This creates a kind of isolation even in the midst of their brotherhood, a loneliness that persists regardless of how many other custodians surround them. Some seek relief through art, creating works of sculpture or painting or music that express things they cannot say in words. The palace contains chambers filled with such artwork, thousands upon thousands of pieces created by custodians over the millennia, each one a wordless expression of the burden they bear. These chambers are known only to the custodians themselves, sacred spaces where they can acknowledge, without speaking, the weight they carry. The companions, those 300 custodians who stand in the Emperor's presence at all times, bear an even heavier burden. They stand in a ring around the golden throne, never moving, never speaking, maintaining perfect vigilance 24 hours a day for years at a time. The longest recorded service in this role was 100 years, a century of standing motionless in the presence of power so intense that it would destroy a normal human in seconds. What do they experience during this time? What thoughts pass through their minds as they stand there, exposed constantly to the psychic radiation of the Emperor, hearing the whispers from beyond the sealed webway gate, watching the golden throne deteriorate with agonizing slowness? These are questions that cannot be answered, for the companions do not speak of their service, not even to fellow custodians. Whatever they witness, whatever they experience, whatever revelations come to them during those long years of vigil, they keep to themselves. Conclusion. The price of salvation. We have journeyed through the secrets that the custodians guard, from the demonic horde pressing against the sealed webway gate to the horrors contained in the dark cells, from the forbidden knowledge locked in the deepest vaults to the true state of the golden throne itself. We have explored the nature of their oaths and the burden of eternal vigilance. But one question remains. Why must this be so? Why is their silence so absolute? The answer lies in a truth more fundamental than any specific secret, more important than any individual piece of knowledge. The custodians understand something that most citizens of the Imperium cannot, that civilization is a fragile thing, held together not primarily by laws or armies, but by shared beliefs and common faith. The Imperium endures not because it is strong, though it possesses immense military might, but because billions of humans across 1 million worlds believe in something larger than themselves, in a God Emperor who watches over them, in a system that has meaning and purpose. If the truths that the custodians guard became known, that faith would shatter. Citizens would learn that their God is a broken shell, sustained only by vast sacrifice, holding back horrors that could consume terror at any moment. They would discover that the Imperium's very existence depends on machines that are failing, on seals that are weakening, on ancient technologies that cannot be repaired or replaced. They would find out that beneath the palace, literally beneath the very throne of the God Emperor, lies a prison containing things so terrible that their release would spell humanity's end. And humanity would despair, not the noble despair that leads to heroic last stands, but the corrosive despair that destroys will and corrupts faith. Soldiers would lose the conviction that makes them willing to die for the Imperium. Workers would question why they should toil when the system they serve is built on lies. Psychers, learning the truth about the warp and the Emperor's constant struggle against it, would become more vulnerable to corruption, their doubts creating openings for the very demons they should resist. This is why the custodians are forbidden to speak, not because the Emperor was cruel or because the Imperium is fundamentally dishonest, but because some truths are too heavy for most humans to bear. The custodians, with their enhanced minds and psychological conditioning, can carry this knowledge without breaking. Normal humans cannot. It is that simple and that terrible. So they stand their eternal vigil in silence, these golden warriors, bearing burdens that would crush lesser beings. They watch as the Imperium slowly decays, as the threats against humanity multiply, as the Golden Throne inches closer to failure. They know that their silence may ultimately doom the very civilization they exist to protect, that there may come a time when the secrets they guard must be revealed if humanity is to survive. But until that day comes, if it ever does, they will maintain their watch, they will keep their secrets, they will bear their burden, because this is what the Emperor created them to do, and they will not fail him, even if their loyalty requires them to watch in silence as everything he built crumbles around them. The Custodians are forbidden to speak because their words could destroy humanity more surely than any army, more completely than any weapon, and so they choose silence, and in that choice, demonstrate a courage greater than any displayed on any battlefield. For it takes no courage to fight and die for a cause you believe in, but it takes immense courage to bear knowledge that could save lives but might destroy souls, to carry truths that could prevent suffering but would create despair, to maintain silence when every instinct demands that you speak. This is the secret of the Custodian Guard, the one truth that explains all their mysteries. They are silent because they love humanity enough to let it live in ignorance rather than die in knowledge. They are forbidden to speak because their silence is the gift they give to a species that could not survive the weight of truth, and they bear this burden willingly, knowing that their sacrifice is the price that must be paid for humanity's continued existence. In the grim darkness of the far future, where there is only war, the Adeptus Custodes stand as proof that sometimes the greatest heroism is not found in the heat of battle, but in the cold discipline of eternal silence. If you enjoyed this deep dive into the mysteries of the Custodian Guard and the secrets they protect, please consider liking this video and subscribing to the channel. There are countless other corners of the Warhammer 40,000 universe to explore, mysteries to unravel, and stories to tell. Join us as we continue to examine the grim darkness of the far future, one tale at a time.
I hope you guys enjoyed the story. Make sure to hit the subscribe, like, share button, whatever you want. Give me some feedback if there's any. And yeah, sleep well.